Writing these essays can be so annoying because you don't know what you're doing, because you have not been asked to write an essay like this before, right? Like you might have had to write a narrative essay when you were in 10th grade, but 10th grade is a distant memory at this point, and you've spent the last year writing nothing but very scholarly, either persuasive or analytical essays. And you have had very little time to write about yourself. And I haven't asked you ever to write about yourself unless it pertained to like your rhetoric log, right? I didn't give you anything personal writing assignments, you know. But despite that, I do truly like enjoy reading college essays and helping people revise them. And I know what one of the most frustrating things for students is they send you a draft, or they send me a draft, and I'm like, I see nothing about you in this. This does not represent you well. This is not workable at all, and you have to start all over again. So that's why we're doing this activity this week, trying to figure out what is quirky about you, what is interesting, what are you passionate about, and once you have that figured out, then it's time to write it, and then it's time to figure out what do I show and what do I tell. Okay, so college essays, they're a work of literary writing, but they're also persuasive. You're going to provide claims, whether you realize it or not, and you're going to provide evidence to back those claims, hopefully. Lots of specific evidence to back those claims. You'll provide probably appeals to maybe logic, and especially appeals to emotion. But the literary stylings, you're probably rusty on. And showing versus telling, like I say in the notes, is the most fundamental decision you have to make at every step of your college essay. Anything that is shown is going to be more memorable and vivid than something that is told. Therefore, the most important features of your essay should always be shown. And that's done through action and dialogue and some other things, but really primarily it's actions and dialogue. So for example, if I were to tell you I was scared by the lion, like that's telling it, and it's right there, it's very explicit. If you show it, you describe it through actions, right? The lion roared, I jumped back, and I gave a high-pitched squeal, right? You see the difference there? I love my parents so much, I'm telling it to you. How could I show that to you in a few sentences? That I love my parents so much. What could you write that shows that as opposed to telling it? Somebody can put it in the chat, or you could unmute. How could we show that idea as opposed to tell it? I hugged my parents and said, I love you, Mama. I love you, Dada. Yeah, for sure. Something to that effect. You could express that idea. If that idea is really important and deserves to be emphasized, you should spend several sentences and perhaps some dialogue showing that, okay? It was a life-changing moment, and to show that would require many paragraphs, perhaps, of action in order to fully capture the value of it being a life-changing moment, okay? So if we're not familiar with showing versus telling before this, is this starting to make a little sense? Yeah, what I'm getting at? Now, in English class, perhaps prior to this, the teacher said, which one is most valuable? Which one should you always use or try to always use? Showing or telling? What did your English teachers tell you? Exactly. They said, show everything. But here's the thing. If you show everything, and if you're supposed to, as I say, show stuff that's valuable and the most important, your essay becomes insane and like a sensory overload, right? You show the most important parts. But if you overshow, if everything is emphasized, the essay is tedious and it's impossible to figure out what's going on. Exactly, Amber. So let me show you an example of this. I did not ask the student if I could use this as an example, but you're not going to know. That's the funny thing about it. You're not going to know whose essay this is because it's so, we get nothing from it. All right, so if you click through on that link, look at this. As our Jeep rumbled along the steep dirt road, the darkness blanketed everything in sight. We've been in the tight compartment for a time unbeknownst to us as reality began to fade and blend together. The longer we remained in the same place, distracted by the discomfort in our legs and the drowsiness that attempted to claim us with every passing minute, we were lost in the depths of the luscious, vibrant mountains near the western border of a small East African country with nothing but the driver's memory and the light of the stars to guide us. So there's so much being shown here, but it's like, to what end? What's going on? You could have gotten rid of everything up here and been perfect and lost nothing. Because what's valuable in an essay? A college essay is about what subject? What is the topic? Who is the topic? Yeah, you, the person writing it. So every sentence should either explicitly or indirectly come back to you, okay? It's an act of narcissism. And for some of you, that will be very difficult. For some of you, it might be really easy to write about yourself. But like, if you're showing stuff that's just trying to set the mood, you're wasting your time, man. Look at this guy. Never once did the twists and turns of the mountain pass give up their secrets. Also, personification, use it as carefully as you would use, what's a spice in cooking that you don't want to overuse? Like cayenne pepper, right? Like, you don't, if you use it liberally, people are going to, like, you're going to make your dish unappealing, right? Personification, be very careful, because this guy overuses personification, excuse me, to where the essay is just like, you're like, what, to what end is any of this for? Our Jeep, wary of what might lie ahead, again, personification, rolled to a halt before diversion to a road. Like, we still have not gotten to a point where we understand like what the point of this essay is, because there's just so much showing. Do you get the point? I don't need to read any further, hopefully. Don't overshow. You just show the parts that need to be emphasized. And I'm going to give you an example of a good balance in just a second. However, if you tell everything, your essay won't be memorable because it's going to be so bland. Like that essay that OD'd on showing, that was very memorable, but it wasn't good, right? Here's one I found from a student who's going to a great school, and the student figured it out and wrote a good essay. But one of the first drafts the student sent to me over the summer was this. It has become a widely accepted fact that perfection is impossible, yet is a concept I never have been able to let go of. I imagine the perfect person is brilliant, compassionate, and driven. I assume they never tire of doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah. I have dreamt of what that would feel like, and I have exerted insurmountable energy trying to fulfill those standards. I still haven't experienced what perfection feels like, and I doubt anyone ever will. But I do know that I'm done trying to be the first person who does. It's like, I'm not trying to make fun of the like ideas that are being expressed, but is there anything memorable? If like you were reading that, would you have any idea who this student is? No, you don't. Like, everything's being told to you. There's nothing being described. There's no narrative, nothing to tie this to. Okay, and that's because the student was writing without any sort of idea of where they were going. And I don't recommend that. Okay, so I give you examples of overdosing on showing versus telling. It's about balance, okay? And just, yeah, keep that in mind. People are interesting, right? Whether or not you like, or whether or not you agree. Well, I mean, it is true though. Like, a good movie, like your favorite movie, you like it because in some way you enjoy the characters or you relate to their experiences. Like, no one picks their favorite movie because they're like, I find the scenery beautiful. Like, the characters, what goes on in it, I could do without that. But it's all about the scenery for me. That's why it's my favorite movie, right? Like, no one would ever choose that. And by the way, what's a popular way to tell in a movie? If you're filming something and you don't want to have to show something, how do you tell? How do filmmakers tell? What device do they use? No, how do they deliver that exposition, Patrick? And yeah, Marina, they have to use a camera for it. But like, no, dialogue is showing. Think about I've only seen one of the Iron Man movies, and it wasn't the first one. But it was one that started with Iron Man being like, boy, it was a bad Christmas or whatever. It's voiceover. Like, a voiceover is telling you, here I am, and this was a bad time in my life, right? It's not showing it to you. It's just telling the person who's watching the movie, there I am, Tony Stark or whatever his name was, and I'm having a bad time. And it was necessary for the purpose of the movie to get us They're quicker because it was easier than showing. Where was I? I was talking about movies. Let's look at some essays real quick. I'll show you 3. I'm gonna give you some annotations on them. I think that's gonna be it. I think I'm gonna let you on your way. Okay, so I pulled all these from the website that I linked on the worksheet that describes the project. So you may recognize these if you read them. So this is sample essay 1. They titled it Home. Amber Jordan, monologue actually would be a way of telling. If you're talking to the camera and just having, a monologue to the audience, or a soliloquy in a play, Shakespearean play, that's telling. Look at this first paragraph. As I entered the double doors, the smell of freshly rolled biscuits hits me almost instantly. I trace the fan blades as they swing above me, emitting a low, repetitive hum resembling a faint melody. After bringing our usual order, the tailgate special, to my table, my father begins discussing the recent performance of Apple stock with my mother, myself, and my older 11-year-old sister. Bojangles, the southern establishment well known for its fried chicken and reliable fast food, is my family's Friday night restaurant, often accompanied by trips to Ava Perry, the nearby library. With one hand on my breaded chicken and the other on Nancy Drew, Mystery of Crocodile Island, I can barely sit still as the thriller unfolds. They're imprisoned, reptiles, not the enemy's boat. As I delve into the narrative with a sip of sweet tea, I feel at home. What does that opening paragraph contain a lot of? Is it a lot of showing or a lot of telling? Yeah, Marina. Yeah. Because it's describing a lot of action. Walking into Bojangles and the smells of Bojangles. Describing the actions of her parents. And notice it's important because this is a snapshot and it captures a lot of. Is it quirky? Would you describe that scenario as quirky? What makes it quirky, Aliki?
Well, she's talking about like a book and like her opinions while she's reading the book.
Yeah, she's sitting there reading a book in Bojangles. Do y'all know what Bojangles is? Have y'all been to a Bojangles? Do they have them up here?
No,
They don't. I read this last year with my seniors. They had no clue what Bojangles was. But if you go out into the valley where I live, we have a Bojangles. But anyway, it's like a KFC essentially. But there's like the slightest hint of irony here that's implied about, sure. About the fact that she's reading a book and expanding her mind. Her dad's talking about stock and they go to the library, but they're sitting here in this like kind of trashy, like Southern fried chicken place doing all this. But it captures like the quirkiness of her family, right? Thus, it's important to really capture all those details, okay? Is there a sentence in here that just kind of moves the exposition along? Yeah, there is. Which sentence is it? Which sentence tells us important information as opposed to showing? It's not the first sentence. Not the second sentence. Could it be the third sentence? Bojangles, the southern establishment well known for its fried chicken, is my family's Friday night restaurant, often accompanied by trips to Eva Perry, the nearby library. Is that telling us? Yeah, it's telling us. She doesn't need to also have an extra paragraph describing, as we walk down the sidewalk to the library, blah, blah, blah. Right? Like she's just giving us that information for us. Okay. So my point is, there's a balance. For that paragraph, she needed to have more showing than telling. If you scroll down, I go through this entire essay and tell me, Francis, I see that you're on the doc. Can you see my notes that I put on it when you are on the essay or when you are on the Google Doc? God. Well, you can see what I bolded though, right? What I bolded is the parts that I deem as being told, okay? And there are points at which the student who wrote this needs to tell us stuff as opposed to show it to us because it speeds it along because you only get 1,000 words for these things. Notice at the end, there's this like motif throughout this essay of home and what is home for him. The entire end of the essay, my home is a dynamic and eclectic entity. Although I've lived in the same house in Cary, North Carolina for 10 years, I found and carved homes and communities that are filled with enriched by traditions, artists, researchers, and intellectuals. While I may not always live within a 5-mile radius of a Bojangles or in close proximity to Lab 304, Learning to become a more perceptive daughter and sister, to share the beauty of my heritage and to take risks and redefine scientific expectations will continue to impact my sense of home. All that's being told to us, but that's preceded by lots and lots of showing, which is the part that's not bolded, okay? And notice the student probably could have even started her essay with that paragraph, but chooses to hold it at the end. It's a literary choice because stylistically it's more fun to start off. It's more interesting to read an essay that's like set in a Bojangles reading children's lit and talking about Apple stock than it is to have all this telly. But you have to have a mix, okay? Hopefully that's what you're taking away from this. Let me show you another one. If you go to sample 2, please. I'll display it. And you're thinking to yourself, hey, well, I have to have a balance. There always has to be a balance of it. Well, I mean, not necessarily. It depends. Would you say from the little bit we read from that first essay, did that student live a life of adversity? No. She was tackling the essay about like what about you makes you so unique. Because as you could see, she lived in North Carolina. She wasn't some North Carolina hillbilly. Like she was from a different part of the world and had different cultures, but loved living there and loved all the opportunities. So she wasn't writing about overcoming adversity. She was writing about how unique she was. This essay, on the other hand, it was Easter and we shouldn't be celebrating with our family, but my father had locked us in the house. If he wasn't going up, neither were my mother and I. That's a really dynamic beginning. It's telling. It doesn't use dialogue. It's not like dad screaming like, you got to stay in the house. My dad screamed at us. I mean, she could have done that. But as you'll notice, look at the next paragraph. My mother came to the U.S. from Mexico to study English. She'd been an exceptional student and had a bright future ahead of her. But she fell in love, blah, blah, blah. My mother lacked the courage to start over, so she stayed with him and slowly let go of her dreams and aspirations. But she wouldn't allow for the same to happen to me. Like, you could expand that into its own essay, showing all of that. But she doesn't because she has a lot she has to get to. This is an essay about adversity. And if the sort of essay you want to write has a lot going on in it, you're going to have to tell a lot. But you just have to make sure you're very specific about what's going on and avoid any sort of cliched scenarios. And as you can see, there's nothing cliched about the experience the student describes. On a weekly basis, I heard insults and received harassment in the streets, yet I didn't yield to the societal expectations for women by staying indoors. I roamed throughout Egypt, exploring the Great Pyramids of Giza, cruising on the Nile, traveling to Luxor and Aswan, so on and so forth. While we were in Europe enjoying my freedom, my mother moved out and rented her own place. It was as if we'd simultaneously gained our independence. We were proud of each other, and she vicariously lived through my experiences as I sent her pictures and told her about my adventures. Finally, we were free. It's all telling. It's all telling because there's a long journey, and she only has 1,000 words to get there, so you have to tell. So if that's the type of essay you're planning on writing, use this as your model. If you're planning on doing something a little slower, something that focuses on some very specific, details of your life, use that first essay as your model, or use the third one. Let me very quickly point out what I like about this third model. On Silent Siege Day, many students in my high school joined the Students for Life Club and wore red armbands with life on them. As a non-Catholic in a Catholic high school, I knew I had to be cautious in expressing my opinion on the abortion debate. However, when I saw that all the armband wearing students were male, I could not stay silent. I wrote on Instagram, pro-choice does not necessarily imply pro-abortion. It means that we respect a woman's fundamental right to make her own choice regarding her own body. Some of my peers expressed support, but others responded by calling me a dumb bitch, among other names. When I demanded an apology for the name calling, I was told I needed to learn to take a joke. You have a lot of anger. I think you need a boyfriend. Another one of my peers apparently thought the post was sarcastic and said, I didn't know women knew how to use sarcasm. Now notice, when the student cites the name she was called and quotes the comments that she received on her Instagram page and even quotes the Instagram post caption itself, is that showing or telling? Marie says it's telling. But like if you're being specific about dialogue that is said, and I mean, I know that like Instagram comments and things that are hurled at you are not, that's not dialogue, that's just stuff that's typed online. But if you're getting specific about those little minute details, that's showing. Does that make sense? Hopefully. No? Yeah? Does that make sense, Rainey? If you're getting specific about words that are used, about actions, that's showing. If you're being more general just to get to the point, that's telling. This student is going to walk a line between doing both. And if we scroll down on this one, I also did the same thing. I bolded the parts where she tells rather, and then anywhere she was not telling, she's showing. Like when she talks about the Instagram, when she talks about the name she was called, the comments. But she doesn't waste time showing that she was emotionally and mentally exhausted. She could have had a sentence saying, I laid in bed that night. I had gone through 5 boxes of tissues and I cried and blah, blah, blah. She just says flat out, I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. We don't need to have that belabored for us, okay? And you got to make those choices when you're trying to write something that expresses a lot of ideas and a journey in 1,000 words. Okay. So you can look through this. And would it help if I noted at the top of these, bold equals telling? I'll do that because you can't see my comments. All right, let's go back to the notes and we'll close this out. So this was meant to be a guide for you to start working on your own essay, and hopefully you will know more or less what the direction of your essay is going to be after having completed this video assignment for us. Because like I say, free writing is fine, but the sooner you start to consider what the message or the thesis of your essay is, the sooner you'll know what should be emphasized, what should be shown, and what should be told. Yeah, Harini. So I'm using, this is all about when you start writing it. What you produce for me for the video, yeah, there's a lot that you're going to be just telling me about. Does that make sense? I'm not expecting a full essay, but when you start actually writing it, hopefully these notes will be helpful to you. Okay? And the rubric was made by Ms. Zagowski and Ms. Kinzer and myself, but you know my feelings about showing versus telling. I want to see a mix. I want to see you giving me specifics that show your passion for whatever topic. But you can also be telling me. I've always loved rocketry since I was in middle school, right? You don't have to show me, like, Sanjam, I'm just picking on you and Francis, rocketry that comes to mind. You don't have to show me, like, oh, here's my ribbons and my participation badges from rocketry club all the way back to middle school, right? Like sometimes it's just more conducive for time to tell as opposed to show. Any questions about this? No? All right. If you do, you can stick around and ask them, but I'm giving you the rest of time in class to be working on your video project, and then you can turn it in through Flipgrid, and please have it done by the beginning of the next class so I can watch those and get those grades put in. I've updated the grades for your what do you call it?